Hey, thanks so much for tuning into the Daily Dose for Spiritual Growth. Happy Tuesday, everyone. We are going through the book of Genesis, chapter by chapter. One chapter equals one day, and we're going to be in Genesis chapter 22 today.
And so we're going to be reading a story today, as you do on your own, about Abraham and Isaac. And it's pretty intense. I don't want to give a lot away in case you haven't read it. It's a good one. Read through the whole thing, but we're only going to read to you the first two verses for the Daily Dose. In verse 1, it says, sometime later, God tested Abraham. Did you say this was chapter 22?
22.
I don't know if we said that. Chapter 22.
Yes.
Sometime later, God tested Abraham, and he said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Then God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain that I will show you. Now, if you've never read this, what? Yes. Yeah. Read the whole chapter. It's so interesting what happens in here. There's a lot of twists and turns.
Yes.
But what we want to kind of focus on today is maybe something that you have never lingered long enough to pause on because you want to get to the rest of the chapter. That word, tested. In my Bible, chapter 22 is literally titled Abraham Tested, but we see that evidenced in verse 1. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. What does that mean? What does it mean to be tested by God? Is that a biblical principle? Is that God being mean, like a mean school teacher at the front of the class checking on you? What does tested mean? And how do you do when you're tested by God?
Yeah, and we see here in the Old Testament, in Genesis, and then we also see it in the New Testament. Jesus was even tested going into the wilderness. Jesus was tested.
So it's a biblical principle
it is a biblical
of being tested by God.
So what is the purpose?
Yeah.
Why do we do that? Well, actually, the word test is translated is to be proved by trial. Meaning this, when God tests us, it's actually a good thing. It's a good thing. Why is it a good thing? It's to prove that our faith is real, that we can step out in faith, that we can put our trust and our dependency upon God the Father, not our earthly circumstances. And so what areas in your life have you seen God test you and that you have shown yourself, be proven that, hey, my faith is real, not to prove to God, but really to prove to yourself and to the other people around you.
And I think that's important to note, Pastor, is that this test isn't to show the teacher what you know, right? God already knows your heart. Yeah. He already knows the status of your trust. He already knows the status of your faith. He's not trying to find out how faithful you'll be. He already knows. Really, these tests are for us. Yeah. And maybe as you look back over your life and you consider some of the tests that you've walked through with the Lord, maybe you see, wow, it was really then in that moment. I know we can recognize this. It was really through that hard time that I recognized how solid my faith was. Or maybe you found some broken spots, some weak spots. Think about the Bible and characters in the Bible. Can you relate? Maybe like Abraham, you've been called to step out in faith, maybe to leave a comfort zone. How did you do in the test? Maybe like Stephen, the first martyr, you were asked to stand up for your faith, to share your faith when it was unpopular, unacceptable, or even dangerous to do so. What did you do? Maybe you've had situations where it would be easy, like Paul, to have pride or to, lack integrity and just get away with stuff. And instead, he chose to humble himself and act in integrity when he passed the test. Or maybe like Job, you found yourself in a season of grief and of loss and of devastation. And how did you pass the test? Did you prove that in those moments you clung to God and you leaned on him for strength, not things of this world?
And I think it's important that, those are great questions to ask ourselves and a great reflection to look back upon. But we can easily look back on our failures. We can easily look back and say, I failed. And we can look at ourselves and identify ourselves as, I'm a failure. One thing that we have to understand is that you aren't a failure. Yeah. We aren't failures. The grace of God is sufficient. And God, even if we are unfaithful, we don't prove by trial that our faith, maybe we prove that our faith is weak. One thing we can learn is that we can learn from our mistakes and we can learn from our weaknesses because God will continue to test us. Why? Because his love for us. And so let's take our failures, let's take those times when our faith is weak, and let that be a motivation that we can, now the next time we're tested, we can prove by trial that our faith is real and we can trust in him.
So thank you so much for tuning in today, and we hope to see you again tomorrow for another Daily Dose for Spiritual Growth.